All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another great episode here at IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Don Pizzette, and we are continuing on with our CompTIA IT Fundamentals series. In this episode, we're going to be looking at what is probably the most important application that users make use of today, which is the web browser. And, so many services are available via the web that is really what when people think of the internet, they think of the web. And the tool we use to access that is the web browser. And to guide us through some of the settings and things that we can do on a standard web browser, we've got Mr. Ronnie Wong right here in the studio with us. So, Ronnie, thanks for joining us.
Well, Don, thank you again for being with me as we continue on through our IT fundamentals journey here. We are taking a look at this idea of the web browser, and most of the time, as far as people that are just taking a look at it from a computer standpoint, yeah, they're just using it to browse around on the internet, to do other things, to just connect and take a look, buy, shop. I think is kind of a big one that you have, but there's other settings in the browser itself that we can use to help us to control some of the content, as well as to adjust it for a little bit more security. And then, of course, sometimes it actually stores more information than we want it to. We want to take a look at some of these different settings that we can manipulate and change to make it a little bit more effective for us too. So that's what we want to do, and we want to at least show you a few of these options to help us out to ensure that we cover, quite a bit of different scenarios that you might actually go, all right, I need to do this, or I need to do this in the web browser. How do I go about doing that?
All right, well, Ronnie, most people just fire up a web browser and they never really customize settings on it at all, right? If I have Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, Apple Safari, Mozilla Firefox, the list goes on and on. They kind of just work out of the box, right? So if I want to change that behavior, I guess let's start with something a little basic here, which is, why wouldn't I want just all the default settings that come on one of these browsers?
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons why. One, of course, is depending on who actually produced the browser, well, they might actually have some settings that are on there that store a lot of information for us, that actually have it set. Say, hey, here's the way that we're actually making it. It'll make it easier for you to browse, and actually just kind of make it, so much easier, and you won't have to worry or remember a lot of things like passwords sometimes, or even websites that you go to more often. And as soon as you start typing something in, it'll be right there and available for you, and that will end up getting stored on your web browser inside of the cache itself, which is a small place in your computer memory that it actually holds everything that it needs to. And that way it seems like you're browsing so much quicker than what you have access to. Sometimes, though, these things can cause problems too, especially if you visit a website a few different times and all of a sudden it says, hey, no, it's not working the way that we want to. So we may want to make sure that we can change that setting too. So let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. So for instance, I just pulled up Microsoft Edge, which is in Windows 10's browser by default. Now, they also have Internet Explorer that's in there, but this is the one that they want you to be able to use. So I've visited a few other websites earlier today. So if I said, hey, I want to go and buy some, let's say RAM, okay, or something like that, or a peripheral that I'm attaching to my MacBook here. So I can just go, let's see, I'll just try Amazon. And Don, it started to go ahead and select Amazon for me. And even though it could do a search in the background very quickly, I can see this icon right here that shows us like a time clock, right? That I've actually already been there before at some point, and it automatically fed that for me. So all I have to do is click there, and there it is. I'm actually now at Amazon. I don't have anything typed in here, but if I logged in and I wanted to be able to sign in and do that, and I told it to remember me and the password here, it could actually log me in without me ever having to do that. So let's say that I want to check my email here. Okay, so if I go to Gmail, and Gmail inbox, I wonder where that brings me. Let's see if I go from here. And look at that, Don. It automatically logged me in. I didn't have to stop at the web page, log in, or do that. It just simply went ahead and said, hey, look, let's just log in, and there we go.
Now, this technology, it started way back in the dial-up days, that when you were on a dial-up modem, you had a very slow internet connection. So when you'd go to web pages that had pictures, it would save a copy of the picture so the next time you pulled up a page, it would load faster, right? It was all about performance. Now it's about convenience, though. And Ronnie, what you just showed us, it's caching way more than just pictures. That was your login credentials, the pages you visited, so basically a history of all the sites that you've accessed. So all of that is being stored by your browser. And do we have any control over that? Are we able to clear it out or turn that off or tweak and customize it?
Yeah, this is what we want to do, right? Sometimes you do need to actually be able to clear this thing out when you need to. If you end up going to a website, let's say you purchase a subscription to a particular website, and what you'll notice is that when they go, hey, I can't access what I think I need to access, the tech support on the other side will say, oh, clear your browser cache. And that's why you want to know how, like, okay, well, how do I do that? Well, of course, they'll try and walk you through it. But if you know how to do it, it actually helps you out a lot more. So that way they're clearing out like maybe what could be cached in there that may be holding it back from what it's doing or giving you old information that you may see. So if we wanted to clear that out in Microsoft Edge, it's over here on the upper right-hand corner. And if I hover over those ellipsis buttons, it actually calls settings and more. I can select that. And then as I scroll down through here, I'm looking for where it says settings. So if I scroll all the way down to the bottom where it says settings, then I can take a look, and what I'm looking for is right here where it says browser data, okay? Clear browser data. Now, even though Don and I described a little bit about what we're actually seeing that's storing, if I click on this button where it says choose what to clear, notice right now it actually shows us, well, just about everything that it can be storing, okay? Browser history, where you've been in the past. Cookies and saved website data. Cookies are objects that websites put on our machine to let them know that we've been there before and that, they can actually track us just a little bit in that sense. So we don't have to keep entering our credentials for different pages that they go to. Cached data and files. So whatever else is actually already pulled in to make things easier for us to browse, it can do that as well. Tabs that I've recently closed, if you have a tabbed web browser, which means these things up here, right? So notice I'm on one tab here and I'm on another tab there. So it can even bring that up and say, hey, here's what I've actually seen you've actually had open before. Let me get back down here to what I was going to do. You name it, download history, form data, passwords, media license, website permissions, all of these different things. And if I wanted to clear that out by default, it says, hey, I'll clear these out. So these are actually the ones that are checked. But notice the things like passwords, okay, and form data, and all that's not checked here too, so it will actually keep that. Now you might be wondering, like, why do I want to clear that out? You may not. You may not want to clear out all that stuff, but this is where you can pick and choose what you do want to clear out by simply putting a check mark there to do so. Where I've seen this a lot more often is when somebody's ended up on a training computer, when we used to do training, where they said, I logged into my company's email, and now when I go to, it's automatically logging me in. How do I get rid of that? Well, you want to go ahead and clear that cache out so that it's not saving that data right there on that computer.
One place where I always see this is at hotels that they usually have like a business computer available down in the lobby where you can sit down and use one of their computers if you don't have your own. Well, if you fire one of those up, you'd be surprised what's already cached in the web browser from previous hotel guests. So it's important to know that these settings are there so we can go and we clear them out, knock the settings out. And this is, Ronnie's showing us in Microsoft Edge, but it's really every browser that does this, right? If you were in Firefox or one of the other ones, they've got the same basic concepts, correct?
Yes, Don. We pretty much will have the same type of settings. Now, they may actually show up a little bit differently. So let me show you this in like Google Chrome just a little bit. So in Google Chrome, here it is. Unlike where we saw inside of Microsoft Edge, where it kind of just pulled up a sidebar for us. Over here, if I select this little stacked button, I can go down to Settings. And now, Don, the settings actually aren't in that little bar anymore. It looks like it brings us to a whole nother web page is what it does. And then when we scroll down, and I have to keep scrolling down, I have to expand out the advanced. And then down here towards the bottom, there it is, okay, is where it says clear browsing history and more. It's kind of scary if you're not exactly sure. And now you can see browsing history, cookie, and other data, cached images and files, you name it. The last hour, 24 days, look at all the stuff that you can clear and kind of select what you want to. Once again, it's fairly the same objects that we saw. So regardless of what browser that we're in, we can clear it out that way. And when you do go to a website and you do get advice from the tech support site that's saying, hey, look, you've got to clear out your browser and make sure that everything's actually working, this is one of the options that you might actually have to be able to do fairly quickly. So make sure you know how to do that, and then you'll reset everything, go back to the web page, and then just ask you to log in and to set your credentials again.
Now, there is another option that's available in most browsers where maybe you know that you're only going to be using this computer for a moment and you don't want your data to be retained. There is a way, I say in most, I'm pretty sure every browser these days has it, where you can choose to browse without the caching functionality. And there's different names for it, like private browsing or incognito.
Right.
Ronnie, can you give us an example of that?
Sure. So this is that idea, right? Is that once we actually run that browser, we don't want to save anything, okay, at the very end of it. So we're not leaving anything behind. At this point, notice that if I select the same option menu over here, you'll see what Don's referring to, which says New in Private Window. And if I select that New in Private Window, it'll change, and you'll see in the upper left-hand corner, the majority of the time, it'll say like Incognito or In Private, anything like this, and it gives us a nice little explanation of what is going on when you use this. It says when you use the In Private tabs, browsing data like cookies, history, and temporary files isn't saved on the device after you're done. So when you close out of the browser itself, it will delete the actual data from the device after the actual browser is closed. So once this is closed, then you won't have that history stored anywhere else. It should be done. Now, Don, most people, though, think that this means that they're secured in their browsing, and that's where there's a mistake. It doesn't provide any security. It provides the ability for you not to have that stuff saved afterwards, but they can still track you if they need to. They can still do all that while you're actually in here.
And that's a really good point, is all those things that get cached in a normal browser, they're getting cached here too. The only difference is that when you close this window, it's automatically purging that cache. It's getting rid of the files. So it's not making you invisible. You're not all of a sudden going to become some secret agent and nobody will know what you're doing. When you browse the internet, it's inherently non-secure. So you're able to be detected. But it makes sure that you don't leave a whole lot of stuff behind on a computer. So if you are going to use that hotel computer or even just a friend's computer, when you fire up that web browser, you switch into that private mode or incognito, and now you know that when you close it out, you didn't leave logged in credentials and other things like that behind. So it's kind of a neat one. Now, that's not the only thing that we have to watch out for on browsers. We focus on that because that's probably one of the more common things, but there's a lot of other settings that you can tweak that do help to improve security. One example of that is how browsers handle scripts. There are a lot of exploits and vulnerabilities and weaknesses that are out there that take advantage of the various scripting languages that are available via the web. And Ronnie, most browsers do give us some kind of ability to be able to go in and tweak and manage those settings.
Yes, on these, this is where it becomes a little bit more tricky if you don't know much about what exactly to tweak. But some of the language, though, is fairly direct and straightforward when you actually need to do it. It's finding the actual right setting is kind of the key here when you do this. Okay, so remember that when you visit some of the web pages, right, you're actually getting kind of a conglomeration of a lot of different pieces from all over the place that's on that web page that you pull up, and they can run some type of coding right on your machine. So browsers give us this ability to change that. So here, once again, inside of Microsoft Edge, I can show you where we actually end up getting this to as well. Okay, so there's a couple of options here. Now, in Microsoft Edge, it's not a direct option this way, which is kind of strange. They have it because they have two different browsers on Windows 10 Internet Explorer as well as Microsoft Edge. They have this stored inside of what they call the Internet Options area. Okay. Now, this is normally found in our control panel, but if I come over here to the type search, I can type in Internet Options, and that will bring it up in the control panel. And this is what I'll normally get access to. Okay. So right here in this, this will control it for both Internet Explorer as well as Edge. Then I can go to security. Since Don mentioned security, that's a natural path to do this. For me, setting up the settings here for this zone called Internet, which is what everything is actually done by default, then I can come down here to where it says security level for this zone and select custom level. It's in here that you start to see things you may not hear about or be very familiar with. But notice it starts to talk about some of what it looks like starting with a programming language. But if I start to scroll all the way down, active X controls, down here towards the bottom, and I got to make sure I don't pass through too fast. There it is. Okay, Don was talking about the idea of scripting. Well, it's right here where we can change scripting options. So, for example, active scripting right now. Okay, scripts that can essentially run in my browser. Notice it's currently enabled. Okay, so if I want to disable it, I can go ahead and select the setting right here to disable the active scripting that we need. And that will normally help us to at least change that option to reduce that type of setting for us too. Now you can take a look at some of the other ones that are actually down here, applets and stuff like that as well. But overall though, it's that first option, at least right now, for active scripting that really affects us in terms of things like the JavaScript, like what you're talking about.
Yep, and you do have to be a little careful on this stuff because there are some websites that use these scripts to actually make the website work, right? And so by turning off some of the scripting, if you just go straight out to disable, you might break some website functionality. And so if you encounter that, that's where the third option comes in really handy, which is to prompt. And it says if you go to a website that wants to run active scripts, it will prompt you and say, do you want to run these? And now you can say, all right, am I on a site that I trust? And if I am, I can say yes. Or am I on a site that I don't trust? And I can say no. Well, you can use zones to define all that as well. Make it a little more automatic, but just be aware that there is a little threshold that you cross where you can become so secure that the web just doesn't work anymore. Yeah. And you don't want to end up in that situation. All right, so Ronnie, that's one example of securing things. And do you find that the manufacturers of our web browsers, do you find that their default settings are pretty adequate for most users, or do you find yourself having to go in there and tweak a lot of these things on your own?
Well, not everything, but if I was really at this point where I'm worried about, the active scripts are running and not at least prompting me and asking, then I'll go ahead and do so. If I'm not so worried about it, then yes, I need to, or if I'm not so worried about it, it's probably adequate as long as you're going to sites that, are relatively safe. I don't know how else to describe it, generic. If you go to sites where it can be a little bit where you're like, oh, look, free downloads here, well, now you're taking that risk that they're saying, hey, you're already trying to get something for free that you're not supposed to have for free, then, yeah, you might actually run into more of these scripts than you think.
All right. And, speaking of free, that made me think of something else. Web browsers have one primary function, which is to display web pages. Right. You go to a page, you see a page, there you go. Very exciting, right? But because web browsers have become so ubiquitous, they've become our standard tool for interfacing with the internet, a lot of people have seen where they might want to extend the functionality of the web browser, adding more to it. So most web browsers, and Firefox, Chrome, IE, all of them, have what are called add-ons.
Yep.
Those things, those are they can be a bit dangerous as well, because now we're basically tacking on software into our browser. So can you show us an example of how we might use add-ons or extensions, or how we might just be on the lookout for them as far as browser security?
Sure thing. So when we start taking a look at this, normally if you're adding something onto the browser, right, you're trying to extend some of the capabilities to make it a little bit easier to function, to do what you want it to do, or maybe even to block something if you also needed to as well. So you're saying, hey, in the browser, when it pulls this up, if it's running this, stop it. Okay, make sure it doesn't allow us to do that. Most people like doing this for things like ad blockers and stuff like this too. But it gives us that ability to add on that extra component into the browsing window. Now this depends on the browser as well. So if you go to things like Internet Explorer and Microsoft, their pool of add-ons are not as big as something like Google Chrome is what you might see, or even Firefox, which I think actually has more than anybody else in terms of these different add-ons that are actually available to you. So for you to add this in, though, it's actually relatively easy, depending on what you're doing. So let's take a look once again at Edge here. That will help us out. If I click on the little button here, okay, then what I want to do is come down, and Microsoft calls theirs extensions. Sometimes you'll see the other places. I think Google calls theirs add-ons for one reason or another, but in my head, I can check that. Now, it brings you, instead of directly to a list of them, it says, hey, you got to go to the store, okay? Not whose store, but it's Microsoft Store is what it is. But that's where you're doing it. You're getting it from the Windows Store here, or the Microsoft Store. And when we do that, that will, of course, lead up to, well, look at all these, okay? Extensions for Microsoft Edge. Boost the power of your browser. Get these handy extensions designed for Microsoft Edge here. And you'll see that they have them for everything, Don, underneath the sun, okay? And it's amazing how many different options that you can add in here. So, like the idea of ad blocker, that's pretty popular one that you can add in there. Or you can even go down to add in like a OneNote clipper if you have OneNote, another application that you want to be able to say, hey, I want to clip this out of my browser and pull that into OneNote, you can do that too.
Ronnie, I see Ghostery in the list. Have you ever used Ghostery?
I have not used Ghostery.
So it will make you reevaluate the web, because what it does is you can go to a website and it will show all the different places that your data is being sent when you view a website. So, an ad blocker blocks ads, right? But it doesn't necessarily tell you about all the ads it's blocking. It just gets rid of them. With Ghostery, you can actually see that. So when you wonder, like, how is my information getting shared? How many different servers am I accessing? Ghostery will show you that. It's really cool. And so if you're ever bored, check it out.
Yeah, so I'm just going to add that one in to show you how easy it is to add an add-on in here or an extension. And now notice it says that the product is now installed, which is good. And I can see that it actually says, hey, Ghostery, check it out here. And let's see, everything looks good. I think that's it. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now over on the right-hand side, to start using it, privacy ad blocker, turn it on. Let's turn this thing on. It says it will see the websites you visit, read and change anything that you receive from the web, you name it. It will do that. And there we go. So it will now show on the bar itself on what we actually need. And you see the little icon here, Don, right here, which, funny, a little ghost, of course, and all the setup that you can do. So at this point, if we now go to browse a page, right? So Don, what page should we browse and see what we can find out here?
Pick a news site, because they're crazy. So if you go to like CNN.com or something, each advertisement that's displayed in the background is basically a connection to another server, which may not be CNN's. It might be some ad service or whatever. And so look at the number on Ghostery just starting to count up. As each element of this web page is loaded, it's showing us how many other places it's connecting to. This type of visibility is really cool, and it helps us to get an idea of what's going on in the background. Well, some extensions like this one they're good, right? They help you to understand your data. Some extensions can be bad, though, as well. It looks like it's part of the web browser, but it is a separate program that's running that technically has access to every website you go to. So if you log into your banking website, your data is flowing through this extension or plugin, this add-on, and it's able to see that data. So you've got to make sure that you trust the add-ons. Now, Ronnie got this from the Microsoft App Store. It's going to be safe. We can trust that. Or if we get it from Google's Chrome store, you can typically trust those. But if you download a browser extension from just some regular old website, that should be a big red flag. That's dangerous, because your entire web browsing session is available to those plugins, and that means you could be leaking out data that you don't expect.
Yeah, it's quite amazing on things like that we don't think about, right? So most of the people that aren't thinking about this, they don't know how much data they're really actually showing people. So here, the browsing history and everything. But for us here, it looks like Ghostery is 27 trackers. And notice at that point, we can even do some that will help us to enhance anti-tracking, restrict the site, trust the site, pause it, you name it, it will allow us to do that. So that is a feature of what an extension can do. Now, if you're actually done with that as well, I can select I right-clicked on it and selected Manage. If I wanted to uninstall it, okay, I just simply select the uninstall button, and that will also remove it too. So it's fairly easy for us to be able to run those. Now, there is a chance of add-on or extension overload, though, okay, Don, where somebody goes, I need this for this, I need this for this, and all of a sudden you have like 15 or 20 different icons up there where, you don't know exactly what they're all doing. You think they're all doing the same thing. But at the same time, that can then start to slow down all of your browsing that you're actually doing, because it has to go and check through all those different ones that are on. So it's actually helpful as long as you pick the ones that you really need. Not helpful if you go, I'm just going to throw everything at it that I can think of underneath the sun to do it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And affecting browser performance is a big part of it. Compromising your privacy is another part. Those are all things we need to be aware of whenever we add on. And, we're talking about it in terms of a web browser, but really it's even your regular operating system. Yeah. Anytime you add software to it, you're putting trust in whoever that software vendor is. All right. As we talk about some of these things that are unsafe, right? If you work in an enterprise environment, in a corporate environment, the company is going to be concerned with you keeping your data safe and protected, not just you. You're not on your own when you work at a company. And so a lot of them will leverage advanced things like web filters or scrubbers, where as you browse the internet, all of your traffic is being filtered so that if you go to a malicious website, it's being cleaned before it even gets to your computer. And that's commonly handled through what's called a proxy server. Now, a lot of web browsers have support for that. Ronnie, can you show us how we would go about configuring like a proxy in a web browser?
Sure. When we start taking a look at that, right, the idea is fairly simple. If you have that proxy set up, you just have to redirect your browser to do so. Now, finding those settings is not the easiest thing if you haven't done it before, but we can show you where at least the general settings are going to be and what you're going to be looking for. So once again, I'll use Edge to help us out as well. To do this, if I click on the button again, I can scroll back down and I'm looking for that settings options. So you're seeing where there's actually something that's going to do that. And then I want to select View Advanced Settings. And notice that there's the option right here where I've scrolled up to the top where it says Proxy Setup. So it's right here for Edge. I want to call it Internet Edge. Right here for Microsoft Edge, I open up the proxy settings, and it's here that you can go ahead and set this up right here too. Okay. Use a proxy server for the connections that we're actually doing. At this point, this is what you would do. So if you have a script for it that will do it, you just simply turn that one on, and you can add in the script address. Or if you know the IP address, in other words, the the network address and the port number that it's using, you simply set the address up right here. And of course, it says the other things here, proxy settings, except for the addresses that begin with these entries here too, okay? So all of those are possible when you want to do that. And that way everything goes through that filter like what Don was talking about before it actually gets to you. And you're only connecting to that filter really when you start doing this. Now, Don, I see this on a daily basis because I have satellite internet access, satellite internet access. And on that, they don't directly take you to the website. They tell you that you should actually be redirecting all of your browsers. So this setting is active on ours at home for our browsers because it actually is going to a proxy server that they've set up for us to make the browsing experience seem a lot faster is what they've done. So sometimes a proxy server can help you to do that too, that on your end, it seems a lot quicker than what the other connection would be. If I had to go and shoot my connection through space and go all the way out to a web server somewhere else besides where it was ending up in its connection. So that's one of the general settings that you'll end up seeing. And you'll see the same things. As long as you look for the proxy settings in whatever web browser that you're in, usually the configuration is just about the same as what we've showed you here. Okay.
All right, so Ronnie, you have shown us in this episode quite a few different features that are available in a web browser. I know it can seem overwhelming sometimes, but these settings are available in pretty much every different browser that's out there, and we do need to be aware of them. I know we still have a lot more features to cover as well, though. So let's break this up into a two-parter, and in part two, we'll continue on and get a chance to see some of those other features. Now, before we wrap this one up, though, do you have anything else that you want to add before we close?
Well, just remember, right, what we're taking a look at is all these different settings that you may not have looked at before. But yes, if you're going to try and make some headway into this industry, you need to at least take a look at some of these different settings that are available. And don't be afraid to switch browsers, okay? Take a look at some of the different ones. You might find that there's one that you really like versus some of the other ones that you go, it worked adequately, it was sufficient. You might end up finding one that you really are going to get into. And so learn all that you can about that, and you'll be ready to go.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, in this episode, we had a chance to learn a little bit about the data that's cached by our web browsers. We got to see private browsing or incognito mode and how we can save that, or save our data from being stored, the opposite of saving our data, I suppose. We had a chance to talk about browser extensions and add-ons and proxy servers. Those are all important features in a browser. We do have a lot more, though, so stay tuned for part two. But as far as this episode is concerned, we're going to wrap this one up. So signing off for IT Pro TV, I'm Don Pizzette.
And I'm Ronnie Wong.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.